Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The Movie Podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. We've got a big show this week as we get into the last 2 months of the year, and it's Oscar bait time. This week, we have 4 brand new movies with 4 brand new reviews that are all playing in theaters right now. This week on the show, question everything in the new horror film, Heretic. Don't go down without a fight in Elevation. Time lapse. Joy, hope, loss, love, life happens in here. And finally, justice is blind, guilt sees everything, and Clint Eastwood's Juror number 2. We've got a lot to cover this week, so let's jump right in. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
Out of the windows to watch a roar and a burst of flame. The Movie Wire podcast. With just meet people like me. Podcast for hot and trending movies. The Wire. And here we go.
A generational story about families with a special place that inhabit, sharing love, loss, and laughter. Tom Hanks and Robin Wright star in the Robert Zemeckis film, Here.
Hey, Dad. I'd like you to meet Margaret.
Nice to meet you, Margaret.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Young.
Time sure does fly, doesn't it?
Sure does.
Take a straight and stronger course to the corner of your life. Make the White Queen run so fast. She hasn't got time to make you.
Right here is where we want to be.
You know, if you like, you could spend the rest of the night here.
I could spend the rest of my life here.
This was our home. We lived here.
Before we get into it, let's just prep for this review. Let me begin. Let me just begin by saying that Here, starring Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, is a cinematic equivalent of an awkward family dinner where you accidentally sit next to that one family member who insists on talking about conspiracies or politics, but you're too far into the meal to escape without looking rude. It's about the same level of discomfort with just more lingering shots of people staring out the same damn living room window for 2 hours, and maybe fewer tinfoil hats. Although, to be fair, I wouldn't put it past this movie to include a plot about tinfoil. Here is one of those films that really, really, really wants you to feel something. It yearns and almost begs for a deep emotional experience. It's like the spiritual cousin of Forrest Gump in 1999's A Story of Us, starring Bruce Willis and Michelle Pfeiffer, both of which are indefinitely more enjoyable and require far fewer sighs. Here, however, despite the presence of the likable Tom Hanks, a man who has somehow survived multiple decades in Hollywood while maintaining an uncanny ability to be not a complete asshole, somehow manages to be an emotionally hollow and thematically vapid. There are times when we sit down to a movie and ask ourselves the most simplistic questions while watching. Sometimes it's, how did they do that? Why did the talent decide to portray their character like that? To even why or how this movie even got made. I asked all of these questions during my viewing of Here, with the prominent question being my first one: how did they do that? How did they make such a movie that is so pointless, so emotionally empty, so goddamn annoying that it went into production? How did they get Tom Hanks and Robin White to agree on a movie of utter nonsense? And why and how did Miramax go forward with a movie that must have been more confusing on paper than having visuals to help the audience? Maybe it was a domino effect of our powerhouse of writing talents of Eric Roth from Forrest Gump, Dune, The Killers of the Flower Moon, Munich, Ali, A Star is Born, and well-known Back to the Future writer Robert Zemeckis. You put these two solid talents on a screenplay, and studios are going to read it, not understand it, and they're going to scratch their head, and that's the indication to them that this must be good. This is too confusing for us to understand, but these two talents got it. And then you have casting ideas such as Tom Hanks attached. Roth and Zemeckis just pulled the biggest cinematic gaslighting scam on the studio. The movie again stars Tom Hanks as Richard and Robin Wright as Margaret, who live within a home Richard's parents left to him. But their life isn't really the point of the movie. It's just a fragment of numerous clips from time jumps that's scattered all over the 2-hour runtime that surround this house and the property from its history. From pre-America to the Civil War, civil rights of the 60s to the 80s and today. This is truly a house that has seen it all. But with all the time jumps, it never stays in one place to really have me care. Zemeckis attempts an emotional cinematic strobe light approach here, where even if the movie stays still for too long meaning around 2 minutes, there has to be something visual that happens. Either a cut to a different time, small scrapbook outlines that pop up on the screen to show a piece of the house in a different time, or the outside of a house changing time. It's absolutely annoying. It's the most fast-paced coming-of-age drama that I have ever seen. And that's not a compliment. It's so fast-paced it skips past any attempt to connect with the audience, to give us any sort of feeling, to make us care about who and what is happening on screen. And we will pause the review for just 1 second. At first, these jumping around from times at lightning speed annoyed me, but as I got into about the 30-minute mark, I started to appreciate it, because that made me feel like the movie will end quicker. So I wanted to shout to the screen, "Go faster! Go faster, Zemeckis! Go!" He must have listened, because the movie did tend to speed up. Either that or Zemeckis realized this movie makes absolutely no sense, and he was too deep in development and wanted to get this thing over with. The problem we have with Here is that it's hard to find one thing that actually works in this mess of a movie. It's just a scattered mess with the production value of a Saturday Night Live skit. Even when we have written dialogue by Roth, Zemeckis, and Richard Maguire, these three writers bring nothing but simplistic surface-level dialogue to the screen. Lines are so brave, so simplistic, and so dull. Our performances by Hanks and Wright feel like an after-school special, where it matches the dialogue. It's structured and stiff, where there isn't a lot for our main characters to play with. It felt like Zemeckis was so concerned on giving us visuals to move this movie along that he wasn't concerned on how our characters got us to the end. With all the aging and de-aging, it played off like a demo reel for aging and de-aging technology in cinema. With all the attempted stories in this movie, and again, stories being a very loose term here when it comes to what Here is trying to tell, by the time the movie gets to the climax, I have not one clue what Here is trying to fucking tell me. Zemeckis never successfully ties all these stories together. It would have been more interesting having us stare at a price tag of the house for how much more expensive this house got over the years and called it Zillow the Movie or Redfin the Interest Rate Revenge. That would have been a movie to both keep me on the edge of my seat with a climax that would have ended in emotional tears. Here is a film that may appease fans of Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. The one thing that some might be entertained by is the on-screen presence of these two, but at the same time, their presence is not properly utilized. This is a movie that made me completely frustrated with how much talent was involved. For almost 2 hours, it banked on star power and aging technology. Zemeckis, I'm sorry, but this house is a shit show. In the end, here feels like a film made for people who want to pretend they're deep, but actually don't want to do the work figuring out what it might mean. It's a simplistic emotional concept that was meant for direct streaming. It's an exercise in cinematic self-indulgence of emotion that's completely unconcerned with actually telling a story or providing any real emotional payoff. You're left with some okay set design, a talented lead actor, and a whole lot of nothing much in between. Here should have never been here. I'm giving here 1 star. While serving as a juror in a high-profile murder trial, family man Justin Kemp finds himself struggling with a serious moral dilemma, one he can use to sway the jury verdict and potentially convict or free the wrong killer in Juror number 2.
It was last October. It was raining, and I hit something. I got out of the car and I looked around. I checked, I didn't see anything, and I figured it was a deer that ran off.
Okay, what's the problem?
I got called for jury duty. The Kendall Carter case?
1 year ago, on October 25th, the defendant, James Scythe, and his then girlfriend, Kendall Carter, they had a fight. And he's gonna pay for what he did.
What are you telling me?
Maybe I didn't hit a deer.
Let me just ask you one thing. Did you guys ever look at any other suspect? You know what to do.
Well, this was a complete palate cleanse from this week at the movies. Clint Eastwood's Juror number 2 is a gripping courtroom drama that delves into the psychological complexities of justice, responsibility, and the weight of moral choices, which is even more relevant today when it comes to not just the justice system, but the overall feeling of how society treats every judgment that we see. Our culture has shifted innocent until proven guilty till guilty until proven innocent, with the burden of proof not to be on the prosecution, but on the defendant. Set primarily within the confines of a jury deliberation room, the film explores the lives of 12 strangers thrown together by circumstance and tasked with deciding the fate of a defendant accused of murder. Eastwood, in his unique directorial style, crafts a film that's not just about the ins and outs of trial, but how the personal biases, emotions, and past experiences can influence the decision-making of the process. In his first writing debut, Jonathan A. Abrams creates a cleverly written courtroom drama with added stakes that really doesn't force us to sit through yet another overdramatic courtroom thriller, but centers around a singular character to control the thrills. Here we don't have lawyers screaming at each other in the courtroom. We don't have cliche moments of argument. We get real human characters that bring their own selfishness before justice. Abrams plays with this messaging by bringing the viewer in on self-reflection, by asking us, what would you do? What would you say? How far would you go if you were to be put in juror number 2's position? The film is carried by juror number 2, who is Justin Kemp, played by Nicholas Hoult, who is selected for jury duty on a high-profile murder case, while his wife is at the tail end of her pregnancy in the final days. The supporting class, including the more outspoken and combative jurors, provide necessary contrast to juror number 2's quieter, guilt-driven journey. Each of these jurors represents a different facet of society. Juror number 2 is joined by other standout performance jury members such as J.K. Simmons, Reno 911, Cedric Yarbrough, Orange is the New Black, Adrian C. Moore, who all bring a trait or internal conflict and external experience that clouds the judgment in the jury room. These characters are reminiscent to one of the greatest courtroom dramas of all time, 12 Angry Men, and puts a spin on it with an elevated level of conflict. Yes, we get a variety of character similarities at a simplistic level, which nobody wants to be there. It's an interruption to their life. Juror number 2 gives us a lot of these similarities and feelings of 12 Angry Men, but that merely is due in part to Clint Eastwood's direction, who we can tell took inspiration from the old black and white courtroom drama. Even a clever nod with a single shot of juror number 2 staring out a window with the light peeking through the blinds to highlight his eyes as awakening. Even though the direction from Eastwood captures perfectly the intimacy of confrontation of conflict, the characters is what truly makes us an effective and at times unique courtroom drama. What really separates this movie from movies like 12 Angry Men is that it's not secluded to a single jury deliberation room. We get insight from flashback, courtroom scenes, and the relationship that I found refreshing from our lawyers, the prosecutor played by Toni Collette and public defender played by Chris Messina. Both writer Jonathan Abrams and Eastwood never shows temptation to put these lawyers in the spotlight of over-dramatic passion. What's so special about these lawyers, these two characters, and the performances is that they always stay neutral, as if they both have question marks hanging over their head on the moral choices and defending their side without fully knowing the truth. Our two lawyers play their arguments at a linear level to not outshine our jury. It's a merely perfected balance to lead to the execution of messaging of justice. As the days of the trial tick by, the deliberation room becomes a moral battlefield, not just for justice, but for the very idea of what constitutes fairness in a world riddled with systematic inequality. Through a series of debates, challenges, and the power struggles among the jurors, Eastwood navigates themes of gender power, social classes, the question of can people change, and the idea of the greater good versus individual responsibility. At the core of this narrative is the concept that, for better or worse, each juror brings her own baggage to the table. And it is in this crucible of this emotional psychological melting pot that true justice, or lack thereof in some cases, is forged. Juror number 2 puts the flaws on display and question of our justice system. As we evolve as society, juror number 2 shows how movies are extremely important, especially today, to help teach, give a visual of what truth and justice is, and what moral accountability is, not just in our own life, but if a person's entire life is put in your hands, is it the duty of discussion to truth more important than a few hours of your lost life? Eastwood takes an old school direction with an exclamation mark on messaging in current society. At its core, juror number 2 is a mediation on justice, personal responsibility, and the human tendency to cling on to preconceived notions in the face of uncomfortable truth. Eastwood uses the jurors' deliberation as a microscope for a broader societal issue. The film takes on the justice system flaws, particularly in how often it fails marginalized groups, and the basis of those in power or social groups, whether in a jury room or a courtroom, can dictate the fate of the accused. One of the most powerful elements of the film is the moral complexity it presents. Juror number 2's internal struggle is embellished how the way individuals must reconcile their personal feelings with their larger responsibility of making decisions that affect others. The question posed in the messaging is not simply whether the defendant is guilty or innocent, but whether the jury, embodying society as a whole, can ever truly make a just decision, free from bias, fear, or self-interest. Eastwood as a director, when he does a movie with moral messaging, I do respect the level of care and execution he puts into not just creating a film, but ensuring the messaging is up front and center. Juror number 2 is going to be one of those movies that will fly under the radar, and at just the first viewing might leave a question mark on how you feel about it. But in reality, the question mark is really going to be the movie making you question your own morals of what would you do. That's supported by fantastic performances and believable chemistry that will keep you hooked for the entire runtime until the outcome. The movie's climax may be an unsatisfying ending, but the whole movie is about questions of morals where you create your own judgment. Clint Eastwood's Juror number 2 is a masterful work of cinematic tension and moral exploration. With sharp writing, a talented ensemble cast, and Eastwood's unflinching direction, the film becomes more than just a courtroom drama. It is a reflection on the complexities of human nature, the moral dilemmas that arise when lives are at stake, and the systems we rely on to achieve fairness. The film's slow burn tension and focus on character development make it a standout in its genre, and its exploration of the human psyche and societal issues give it a timeless, relevant renaissance. In a world where justice is often debated and questioned, Juror number 2 is a sobering reminder that at the end of the day, the decisions we make define who we are, and the consequences of those decisions can ripple through society in profound ways. I'm giving Juror number 2 3.5 stars.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure you check out my reviews for movies that just became available to rent, buy, or stream now.
Now available on video cassette.
If you can't see a better future, build one in Megalopolis, which should have changed its tagline to if you can see a better movie, then do it, receiving 2 stars. October 11th, 1975, the revolution begins at 11:30 and Saturday night, which was chaotic in all the right ways to make it feel like a Saturday night, receiving 3 stars. Life is a learning curve, and Goodrich was an emotional treat, receiving 3.5 stars. The world is a stage, and then the world booed it, but for me it wasn't that bad, and Joker Philia 2 receiving 2.5 stars. Discover the origin behind the rivalry in Transformers 1 that didn't transform into anything original, receiving 2 stars. They went looking for a new life and found them in Alien Romulus, which in the theater no one heard me care, but rather heard me groan, receiving 2 stars. Sometimes to survive, we must become more than we are programmed to be, and not only one of the best movies of the year, but the best animated films in the last decade in The Wild Robot, which received 4 stars. Dennis Quaid from young to old played Ronald Reagan in Reagan. That was a valiant effort, but always felt like something was missing, that received 2.5 stars. The juice is loose in the sequel, 36 years in the making, in Beetlejuice. That was a fun trip that was very much alive, receiving 3 stars. And it makes me really hope that there is a Beetlejuice. Oh shit. Showtime! Everybody deserves a happy ending, and Deadpool and Wolverine, that was one of the biggest, surprising, and audience-fueled experiences of the summer, receiving 3.5 stars. Then finally, The Things Left Unspoken Can't Kill You, and I won't speak to the repetitive formula because I can hear the well-executed pacing and performances in Hear No Evil, which received 3 stars. You can check out those reviews of my previous episodes, and while you do, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe, and please don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Now, before we get into the last set of reviews, there is a podcast that I listen to religiously each and every week. This show is near and dear to my heart because not only do I love having movie discussions with them and stop in from time to time, but I love their insight on movies, comics, and TV, whatever it may be. And I'm talking about Josh and Alex over the Talking Smack podcast. Make sure you check them out. The link to that show will be in the description of this episode. But let's hear from Josh over the Talking Smack podcast now.
What's up, nerds? This is Josh from Talking Smack, where we talk superheroes, movies, animation, comics, and so much more. Every week, we break down the latest blockbuster movies, TV shows, revisit comic events. We even talk to comic creators like Kyle Higgins, Melissa Flores, and Matt Groom. And don't miss out on our Superhero Showdown episodes where we debate your suggestions on who would win in a fight, or maybe they might become friends. So join in on the conversation with me, Josh, and my co-host Alex every Wednesday on your podcatcher of choice. Look for our yellow and red icon, and we'll see you soon, Smackheads.
A single father and two women venture from the safety of their homes to face monstrous creatures to save the life of a young boy in Elevation.
Dad!
3 years ago, the world we knew disappeared overnight.
If you can get to high ground, go there now.
We lost our homes, our communities, and most of the people we loved. We still don't know why above 8,000 feet we're safe.
Go, 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 go!
Hunter's last filter burnt out. The hospital in Boulder will have a crate of them.
You're gonna have to go below the line at least a dozen times.
If I don't go, Hunter dies.
They can't be killed. But no one's had a chance to study them. You study something long enough, you can figure out how to kill it.
If it doesn't kill you first.
Run!
It's different seeing them up close. We're not meant to share the planet with those things. They're Earth's new apex predators. But one day we're gonna beat them.
I can't do this alone.
Come on, Will!
We're gonna have to fight them eventually.
I'm not leaving you. We're in this together.
A lot more of us are gonna die.
I can't lose you.
This is about more than just your son.
There's no such thing as more than my son.
We have watched monsters in cinema that can sense heat, sound, vibrations, and now we have a monster that can smell CO2 and can't go beyond 8,000 feet in elevation. Why and how, you ask? Elevation never really tells us. We have had hundreds of creature features that are at least fun enough to make us ignore a lot of these questions and just go along for the fun ride. But while watching Elevation as the movie goes on, more questions arrive through my thought process, because the movie like Elevation with its darker tone tries to play the in-between or the balancing act from a movie like A Quiet Place with the mystery element of what these things are and how they hunt to an adventure monster movie, and it never really finds its proper balance. The monsters in Elevation, who are characters called the Reapers, look like something named and copied out of Horizon the video game. These creatures one day came without warning, coming out of the underground with a matter of days killed 95% of the world's population and forced people up to the mountains above 8,000 feet. How they knew they would survive at that elevation in just a matter of a couple days of monsters attacking and wiping out almost the entire population, it doesn't matter. The movie doesn't explain it. But our writers John Glenn, Jacob Roman, and Kenny Ryan make the ultimate mistake when it comes to a movie like this. They give reminders and keep bringing up this thought process throughout the movie, as if we're going to lead to some sort of explanation by the climax. But that never arrives. We're consistently reminded of how they hunt, how far they can go, how we can track them, but never do we get to find out how we gain this information. If I were to compare it to a movie like this, A Quiet Place would be the closest match. A Quiet Place did it smart. It left room to grow. It made it simplistic. These things came down on this day by process of elimination. How they hunt was found by sound. In Elevation, how in the hell did we find out that these damn things can smell our CO2 as we exhale? Who made this discovery? This is oddly specific for this not to be explained. Even more so, to add to the ludicrousy of this, we have a scene where these creatures smell the CO2 from our main character's breath a half a mile away in an open field. Then we have another scene where our main character Will, played by Anthony Mackie, drives a truck at high speed with the exhaust pipes filling the air with gray smoke, and nothing happens, especially with the creatures nearby. The last time I checked, vehicles put out more CO2 than a single person's breath. There are much bigger holes in this story and concept than my underwear from college. Normally, these problems wouldn't have mattered if the movie leaned on more of the fun factor, but it chooses not to, and even more so, to remind the viewer every 10 to 15 minutes of the holes. Now, the movie stars again Anthony Mackie as Will, who has to raise his son Hunter, played by Danny Boyd Jr., in a town in the mountains after his wife is killed in an expedition to get supplies below the elevation line with physicist Hannah, played by Shauna Earp. Hunter has a breathing condition and must use a machine for his breathing, but is running out of filters for his machine. Will recruits Hannah against his better judgment based on their past to help him. Along with his best friend Katie, played by Maddie Hassan, they all journey to travel down the mountain to the town's hospital to get new filters for his son Hunter. Now, here's where I think the movie does add a little bit of uniqueness, is that we don't get the stereotypical characters that we would see for a movie like this. We don't have the wisecracking character, we don't have the comedy relief, we don't have the egotistical character. We have three characters, each with their own baggage and conflict within each other. And this conflict never really overstays its welcome. And this conflict between all of them, this internal conflict and the conflict they have with each other, never really amplifies, it never really fortes. It feels like a human conflict and a human conversation. But at the same time, this could also be a curse of why the movie just doesn't fully work as a monster movie. I did appreciate some of the uniqueness of the characters and the adventurous tropes, and it really doesn't jam-pack this movie full of action. Those are some elements I really did like, as a focus more on the characters. It tries to follow a uniqueness that we saw from A Quiet Place, almost like a copy of a copy, where the quality really starts to diminish as we start to target a climax. It's prominent in the direction of this film, where we can tell our director George Nolfi doesn't know what to really do with the material. They'll build tension outside of seeing our Reapers, seeing our monsters, which, you know what, we don't actually see quite often, by the way, and that's actually a pretty good shame, because those are some of the most adventurous, well-directed scenes. Nolfi has these wide-angle shots, these aerial shots, that show and tell the audience our characters are going to be safe. It demonstrates the next mile, 2 miles of terrain that shows there is no danger. Now, Nolfi in the right movie has shown how to character direct and do it well with movies such as Ocean's 12, The Bourne Ultimatum, and The Adjustment Bureau. But here he is out of his element. Our characters are positioned as if they are meant to be in a crime thriller with mysterious looks, dirty looks, and passive-aggressive delivery on dialogue. This dialogue and these performances belong in a courtroom drama, not a monster movie. But to its credit, Elevation does have fantastic pacing to it and does keep us engaged into what we are seeing, but that's mainly us following the dangling carrot of our questions of who, what, why, when, and how. The movie, by the time the credits roll, will leave us hanging at the end, with no answered questions, except for maybe just one. But all other questions, we have to wait for a sequel. But I will be surprised, given the weak entry it delivers to audiences, that this will even get a sequel. But who knows? Hollywood is so unpredictable. Maybe Nolfi and Zemeckis can team up and invite Tom Hanks over and recruit the house from here, and the house's living room can be a safe zone for the characters in the next movie, Zillow 2: Reaper's Revenge. Elevation, for what it is a generic piece of entertainment that feels like it should have gone straight to streaming. It has its moments of thrill, but it suffers from complete, sloppy, frustrating writing that rides a fine line to insult the audience. My rating is like The Reapers, it can't go past 2 stars. Two young religious women are drawn into a game of cat and mouse in the house of a strange man in Heretic.
Good afternoon. Mr. Reed, are you interested in learning more about the Church of Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
Wow. No, you read more than we do. No, seriously, Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed.
Well, ladies, I think it is time.
Time for what?
Time for enlightenment.
Oh. Mr. Reed?
Welcome.
We need to return to the church.
If you aren't ready to leave, you'll have to exit through the back of my house.
So which door?
It's a simple choice, but it should not be made simply. Belief or disbelief.
What happens if we choose the wrong door?
It's not going through.
You think he wants? I think that we're being studied.
Should we ask him for help?
It doesn't matter what you say to him.
So you have to go doon in order to go hoot.
I beg your pardon? The only way out is through. Is this the game?
High five.
From now on, we challenge him.
For the rest of your lives, there will be before you chose, and there will be after. Ladies, verbally acknowledge, please.
What have you been looking for? What have you found?
Scary. You figured it out yet?
Heretic is as elevated horror goes. In the growing trend of the horror genre, often dominated by predictable formulas and genre tropes, here is another horror film that tries to stand out as an original piece of fear. Heretic emerges as a film of critical thinking that translates into one's psyche of horror, offering a provocative and thought-provoking journey that challenges the boundaries of faith, identity, and the quest for personal freedom. Heretic does something that not many horror films have done in the past, which is make your mind race and your heart pump at the same time in just mere spoken words. Horror affects every viewer differently, but as human nature goes, a natural fear we will all share is the fear of the unknown, or the fear of one's control, or even the fear of a belief that may not exist, or even to the extent that one power looks upon us and has the ultimate decision based on our lives on how we spend eternity. Heretic attacks this subject matter like nodding at Dante's Inferno by Dante Alighieri, taking us through the realms, or sections of the house, if you will, by an older, wide-smiled main character, Mr. Reed, played by Hugh Grant. Mr. Reed invites two Mormon girls over to his home, hinting to seek knowledge of the Church of Jesus Christ by Latter-day Saints. It doesn't take long for him to manipulate these girls into a dangerous game of religious cat and mouse to prove his point on religion. Heretic was written and directed by A Quiet Place and 65 writers Scott Beck and Brian Woods in their most challenging and bold film yet. This is a type of movie that we can tell Beck and Woods had a proper vision of how they wanted to execute this movie, from the dialogue from start to finish, all the way up to the atmosphere, the orange lighting of this atmosphere. The production design is immaculate, with stark minimalist sets and muted color palettes that conveys a message of, at times, the ugly uniformity of the world of belief, to even how they wanted to do the character design, the character direction from Hugh Grant on our two Mormons, Sister Barnes, played by Sophie Thatcher, and Sister Paxton, played by Chloe East. What Beck and Woods do with these characters is not make them too perfect by appearing too perfect on the surface, as to help tell an underlying message through on-screen presence of religion. One of the film's most daring choices is its exploration of the moral and ethical implications of faith and belief. Heretic never portrays our protagonist as a simple good character fighting against a bad character, but allows us to take our three characters and look at them holistically, as if watching an on-screen debate. But where the true magic happens is with the build. Hugh Grant, even at the movie's most tense moments, never breaks his facade. He never becomes so sinister. I was curiously watching each and every facial expression to try and predict Hugh Grant's next move. Hugh Grant's portrayal of Mr. Reed is absolutely spot on, and it's consistent, and it challenges his performance as the movie goes on. It's a brilliant performance. Now, with the heavy-handed dialogue and points it tries to make, as we get into the middle of the second act, this is where at times the dialogue slows down. In reality, should have sped up as we get deeper down the house to hell. As the dialogue from the first act goes from Hugh Grant's entertaining performance and dialogue challenging our two girls, we get more of a lecture in the second act. When the movie changes to a darker tone and less of a challenge of the mind, it almost veers into situational horror. But right when it goes too far, it stops itself before it goes too deep, and then we're just left with a Hugh Grant religion lecture. When we have darker tone and less of a challenge for the mind, we start to slow the process down and just look for actions of what our characters are going to do, not what they're going to say. With the elements of the slower dialogue, the lecturing dialogue, and the darker tone, it gives off a slower pace than what we saw from the first act, and this is what kind of throws off the balance of where this movie is trying to go. But at the same time, even though it is a slower pacing, there is the magic of Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant, the true star that really holds this film together, even with its flaws. Based on the last few years, I've become excited to see a movie with Grant in it, not because of his on-screen presence, but rather to see how he was going to test his range. He is consistently evolving his performances. Over the last recent years, he has taken roles at times feels out of character for him, but he has really embraced these roles to an impressive level. This performance will be the standout for him in his journey. I got the same chills from watching Hugh Grant in this film that I did watching Robin Williams in 1 Hour Photo. It's a much different character, but the performance by Grant in itself will leave goosebumps down your arm. We want to like him, we want to hate him, and at times we want to run from him, but his character will make us look over our shoulder wondering if we should be running or staying with him. Heretic is a clever piece of work. It asks big questions about the nature of belief, the tension between individual identity and collective authority, and the consequences of choosing personal freedom over conformity. Heretic is a story about the human capacity to question, to doubt, and ultimately transcribe the limitation imposed by society and religion. It is a journey not just towards self-discovery of beliefs, but towards self-liberation beyond faith. The movie's main conflict, this thought process, for some, is a scary thought in itself. And in the moment, if you don't find it scary, it at least brings up some great examples and points on religion. It is a film that challenges its audience to reconsider the assumptions they hold about faith, authority, and freedom. And in doing so, it establishes itself as one of the most daring and thought-provoking films of the year. For those willing to embrace the intellectual and emotional challenges of this film, Heretic is a journey well worth taking, and at times will bring even the holiest that come see Heretic into holy hell. That will even make a nun yell holy shit. I'm giving Heretic 3 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. You can also show support by following me on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, Thread, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. And please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you haven't yet checked out the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and the Movie Wire's crossover show, Back to the Balcony, make sure you do. Again, the link of that show will be in the description of this episode. Until next week, do me a favor. Make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film and support your local movie theaters.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.
Let the credits roll. We say farewell. Join us next time. We'll have more tales to tell.